Today I want to talk to you about what we believe is the biggest issue facing retirees today, and that issue is inflation. Inflation is such a dangerous thing because inflation has the power of compounding working against us in the success of a retirement plan. Typically, we talk about compounding as a positive source, something that is great for investments, where year after year we earn returns, not only at that year, but on the returns that we received the previous year. And we look back 5 or 10 years and are amazed by the total investment gains that we've seen over that period. And it's largely due to compounding interest. However, with inflation, compounding works the other way. Compounding starts eating away at our spending power and eating away at the value of the dollar. And so inflation can be really harmful for retirees. For a couple decades, inflation stayed really low, and that was a great thing for people planning their retirement plans. However, what we've seen over the last couple of years is that inflation has really started to pick up, and it's stayed elevated now for the last couple of years, and maybe looks like it'll stay elevated into the future. And that's a big deal for retirees because elevated inflation doesn't just impact this year's spending, but impacts spending for years down the road. Future inflation increases have to be built upon what was already a higher number from the previous year. And if we have multiple years, 3, 4, or 5 years worth of elevated inflation, that can materially change your retirement plan. And so this is a big concern we're hearing from retirement plan clients, and it's something that we think is valid right now. And so then the follow-on question is, hey, if inflation is really a big deal, if we think inflation is going to continue for the next couple of years, what do we do about it? How do we guard against it? And what are the strategic steps that we can take to make sure our retirement plan stays in a good spot? And there's a couple things that I think that we can do. And some of these are very specific to your situation, but from a big picture standpoint, the first thing is making sure that we stay invested correctly. One of the silver linings over the last couple of years with inflation being higher is that we have received higher interest rates on savings accounts, and especially higher interest rates on bonds. Now that we're starting to earn something on fixed income and safer money, that helps offset the impact of inflation. We just have to be intentional and smart about the bonds that we're buying and making sure that we tailor it to the specific spending that you want to do as a retiree. Then secondly, once we've got your next few years of income taken care of and appropriately invested, then we have to look to the rest of the money and make sure that it's set up to hedge against inflation as good as we possibly can. And some of those things that we can potentially do to hedge against inflation are to look at assets that typically track with inflation or even beat inflation over longer periods of time. Sometimes you hear about commodities and how commodities do a really good job of hedging inflation. That relationship can kind of come and go. We saw that very briefly in 2022, but then towards the end of 2022, that relationship kind of fell off. Typically though, one of the assets that actually do a really good job of hedging inflation, at least over a longer term time period, is actually the stock market. And that doesn't sound as flashy as maybe some of the other fixes do, but academic research tells us that it still remains one of the best opportunities. And so making sure that we're specific on setting aside the money you need for spending for the next couple of years and then intentionally investing the rest of the money to counteract the long-term impact of inflation is key to making sure that higher inflation for the next couple of years doesn't materially impact your retirement plan and doesn't throw you off the plan that you've worked so hard to accomplish all of your working years. If you want to talk a little bit about how inflation would impact you personally or the steps that you could take to offset the impact and make sure that you stay on the right path, feel free to contact me or my team. We'd love to sit down, go over a customized plan for you and see how we can make sure that your investment strategy hedges against inflation and make sure that you stay on the right track.